Conversation with the Candidate continues.
Welcome back to our conversation with the candidate and our candidate this evening, New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio. We're going to bring our live town hall audience in, and we're going to start with questions right away with Mr. Gary Evans.
Hi, welcome to New Hampshire.
Thank you, Gary.
I first want to say I'm so discouraged by the lack of progress on my issue, but it's guns. Do you think you could give me 5 things that you think you could do to help solve the gun violence problem in this country?
Yeah. Gary, this right now is something that people are feeling in a very different way, and this is why I am not hopeless at all. I actually think change can happen. And I want to talk to you as a parent, what I'm hearing from parents all over this country. For the first time, parents are scared to send their kids to school. And kids, think about this, kids are going through active shooter drills as a normal part of the school year all over this country. There's something profoundly wrong. Now, the reason I say that is not to celebrate that, but to say people are now feeling this in a very different way. So what are the things we can do? Well, on a policy level, I believe the majority views of the American people are the things that would actually work. The more extensive background checks, waiting periods, assault weapons ban. Those 3 changes, the American people want those changes. We can achieve them. We saw an example in Florida that should give us hope that after that tragedy in Parkland, those students who made their voices heard so passionately, and everyone said, oh, no, the Florida legislature couldn't possibly act, but they did. They felt the pressure and they acted. As president, what I would do is, first of all, go to the states where those recalcitrant senators are. And I don't care if it's a purple state or a red state, because I know the people more and more want to see those common sense changes. But what's lacking is presidential leadership that calls out people and helps people make their voices heard and puts pressure on those swing votes, which are only a handful, really, that we need to win. And then to think about another thing we could do that I think would profoundly change the situation. It's something we're doing in New York, which is neighborhood policing, or you could call it whatever you want around the country, but the idea is to bring police and community together in a much closer alliance to break down some of the barrier that's existed in too many places over the years, because that also helps us get guns off the streets when there's a really close working relationship and dialogue between community members and police. Remember, who's threatened by illegal guns? Who's threatened by the proliferation of guns all over this country? Civilians for sure, law enforcement as well. They're often the ones who bear the brunt the most. We have tough gun safety laws in New York, and we're the safest big city in America right now. Crime has gone down on my watch 6 years in a row because those tough gun safety laws work. But another piece of the equation, I would work for this as president, I would support it with federal policies and federal funding, is the kinds of things that help our police and our community work much more closely together so we can find those illegal guns and get them off the streets.
Because we still have places like New Hampshire where people are going to drive from New York and buy whatever they want.
That's the problem around this whole country. And what we know is we need a national vision for safety. But I want you to remember, this part about parents and kids is so important. And I'm saying this as a father. I didn't have to think this way when my kids went to school. There were not active shooter drills for them. And when you see millions upon millions of Americans, mothers and fathers, having to go through that pain of worrying about their kids, I think that's going to create a kind of an indignation and an energy for change. And look, some of these senators are trying to resist it, but the power of the NRA is starting to crumble. And the last thing I'd say to you, because you asked for different approaches, one of the things we did in New York, I think we should do all over the country, we got to stop funding the gun industry with public pension fund money. We have taken pension fund money out of that industry. That industry and the NRA go hand in hand. They each support each other. You know, there's no city government, state government, county government, university, foundation, none of them should have their pension investments in the gun industry. That's another tangible thing everyone can work for to make sure that we end that unholy alliance. We break through that political logjam. And I think the voices of the people are going to get us the rest of the way.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Gary. Next question comes from Carolyn Morrill.
Hi there. As president, what is your top priority and how do you plan on accomplishing it?
So Carolyn, of course, that's like the most fundamental question, the top priority, and I want to tell you, when I look at this country right now, and I could obviously tell you the great existential threat is climate change, so I will certainly say that's the thing we have to put a whole different kind of approach into. We're doing in New York the Green New Deal. We're implementing the Green New Deal right now, and it's making a huge difference, and that's what I would do as president. But when you say the top priority in terms of the lives of the American people, I go back to the fact that working people's lives are just not good enough in America today. And I go back to the fact that so many people I talk to in New Hampshire and all over the country tell me that what are they experiencing? They're working really hard. They're not making enough money. They don't have enough security now or particularly for their retirement. They're worried about health care and the cost of health care. And God forbid something really serious happened. They're worried about the next generation. And so I think the problem in America today is this country is not supporting working people the way we used to. The whole notion even of being in the middle class, that's not a secure idea the way it used to be. That once you got to the middle class, you were there to stay and things were going to be great. We have to address that in a really aggressive way, in my view. So when I became mayor, I looked at this reality in my city and I said, we've got to actually create a different kind of policy that puts money back in the hands of working people. When we talk about pre-K for all, this is one of my proudest achievements. For so many working families, they couldn't get early childhood education for their kids. They couldn't afford it. And if they shelled out that money, they weren't going to have a lot left. So we made that something available to everyone for free. That lightened their load. That helped a lot of people get to work who couldn't get to work otherwise unless their kids were taken care of. When we did things like $15 minimum wage, that helped a lot of people to have a better life. We've created a dynamic where there's more that you can depend on. For example, one of the things we're doing now, because we all know health care for every family is a profound, the deepest concern, both first and foremost, if you have your health, you have everything. But if you don't have your health, the danger of it even bankrupting a family, that's on the minds of people all over this country. In New York right now, we're saying, we have to act, so we're guaranteeing health care for anyone who doesn't have insurance. Literally saying, we're going to give you a health care card and you get a primary care doctor assigned to you at one of our public hospitals or clinics so that you don't end up, like so many millions of Americans right now, the only doctor they have is the emergency room. And that's the last place to go for health care and the most expensive place for the taxpayer. So I think the issue that animates me is trying to restore a good standard of living for working class and middle class people, more security, more ability for that next generation to do better. And we can do that if we're willing to make some big changes in this country. And I'm hopeful because I saw what we could do in just a few years in the nation's largest city, the changes that could reach millions and millions of people. I know we could do them for the whole country.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carol.
Thank you, Carolyn. Next up is Joan Whitworth.
Good evening, Mayor.
Hey, Joan.
President Trump's trade war with China is costing U.S. businesses and farmers billions of dollars in lost sales, as well as taxpayers even more due to higher prices and the subsidies being paid to farmers to help them survive the loss of their markets. What will you do as president to deal with this situation?
Joan, this is such an important question. I've talked to farmers who are petrified that it's not just that they've lost their markets today, but that they'll never come back. And folks who are saying to me that these policies literally could destroy their way of life. So, Joan, I think the good news is I know the first thing to do is the exact opposite of what Donald Trump is doing. He's given us the negative roadmap, right? This trade war was started without any sense of a strategy, a vision for where it was going. I think a lot of us are frustrated with China. I'm frustrated with China on many fronts. But don't start something unless you know where it's going and how to manage it and how to get it to a positive outcome. This president didn't do that. And so what's happening is who's taking it on the chin? Farmers and consumers. And now there's a threat of global recession. What I would do as president is play to our strengths, not our weaknesses. We as a country, we're still the place that so much of the global economy revolves around. We're a place that so many people and companies from all over the world feel they have to be present in the United States, and we therefore can set the rules in a very, very different way. But in the end, we also do need the alliances that made us strong around the world. And it's almost shocking how this president has seemed to, day by day, destroy and undermine our alliances, which helped us to be as strong a country as we have been. If we're going to move to change things in China, we don't do it alone. We do it in alliance with, say, the European Union as an obvious example. We create a common vision, which takes some patience. I can tell you one thing as a leader, and I represent 8.6 million people. You have to have patience. You actually have to have restraint. This may sound like old-fashioned ideas, but they are important in leadership. And you build alliances to put the pressure on China that is needed to get some of the changes we need from them. You build alliances to put the economic pressure on Russia, which is extremely vulnerable, to stop interfering in our elections, stop interfering in other countries. Case by case, using that power of diplomacy and alliance, and using the fact that we're still the economic powerhouse we have been, but we're not going to be if we lose those alliances and we engage in trade wars recklessly for no vision. The last thing I'll say to you, if we're going to address trade, and there's something I say that we all need to take very seriously. Donald Trump has negotiated a new NAFTA treaty. It's just NAFTA 2.0. It has a different name, but it's the same concept. And in my view, makes the same mistakes. We're going to lose a lot of jobs, and overly empowers multinational corporations rather than working people. Trade treaties in the future should actually be about American workers. They haven't been. They've been of and by and for the corporations. The vision should be what helps American workers, what keeps our jobs, what builds more jobs, what helps people have good wages, good benefits. That's what trade policy should be about, but I'll tell you, it hasn't been in this country, and it's time for a change.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joan. Next up is Terrence Guinaré.
I'm drifting to the water.
Going to get some water. Okay, so the mayor's going to get some water, and next question we're going to have will come from Terrence Guinaré. Go ahead, Terrence.
Hello, Mayor. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Terrence.
Your relationship with NYPD, the largest police force in the country, has been described as strained, combative, and frosty. Same can be said for the current president towards the intelligence community. How can you assure voters that you're the right candidate to unite this country when many Americans believe that these type of adversarial relationships are what is dividing us?
Terrence, I appreciate the honesty of your question, but I'm going to say those descriptions, that may be accurate for my relationship with some of the very vocal and I think mistaken leaders of certain police unions, but not of the rank and file of our police force, and especially not of the leadership of our police force. I am so proud to have brought in extraordinary leaders to the NYPD. Bill Bratton first, and now Jimmy O'Neill, who's a 35-year veteran of the NYPD. And I have been supporting our police leaders consistently. We now have 2,000 more officers on patrol in New York than we had a few years ago. We're the safest big city in America. Crime has gone down 6 years in a row. And we've healed the relationship between our police and our community, which was really strained for a long time and needed that healing. And that's been that strategy of neighborhood policing that's made all the difference. With the comparison, I just have to, with real respect, say, I don't see the comparison to what Donald Trump has done, which is to ignore his own intelligence leaders, to put them down publicly, to not listen to the advice of people who knew a whole lot more than he does. When I talk to the leadership of the NYPD, I understand they are amongst the greatest experts in the world in policing and public safety, and I honor that and respect it. And we've made decisions strategically together that obviously have worked. What Donald Trump does is shocking to me, ignoring or even belittling the folks who have the kind of information and experience to keep our country safe, and therefore, I think, endangering us. And it's not supposed to be that way. We should never get numb here. I think sometimes we see sort of affront after affront from President Trump and tweet after tweet, and it's a little tempting to, just get used to it. This is not the way it's supposed to be. So I would argue to you that respecting the folks who are the leadership of these agencies is crucial to the changes we need. But I would also say to you that if you're going to make real productive changes, like addressing an American challenge, we know we've needed real reform, real criminal justice reform, reforming in the way we police, to end some of the problems of the past and bring police and community together. Some people are going to like that, some people are not. And if you're going to lead and if you're going to make change, you're always going to find some people who disagree. But I'll tell you something, when I said, there was a policy of stop and frisk, for example, it was very controversial, very aggressive policing strategy. I said it was wrong. A lot of the critics said, if you take it away, there'll be chaos, there'll be disorder. A leader says, no, I have a vision of actually going someplace better and helping people come together. We got rid of that broken policy. The city got safer 6 years in a row. And when you talk to folks at the community level now, they say their relationship with their police officers is much closer, much warmer, much more personal. And I want us to get to that day all over this country where, and I always use this example, I want people to think of police officers everywhere in this country, no matter who the background of the people involved is, that people think of our police officers as their guardians. And our officers think of the people they serve in neighborhoods and towns and cities as their own family. And that's a vision we could reach in this country, and we've begun to show it's possible in New York.
Thank you.
Thanks, Terrence. We've got about 90 seconds left in the TV portion, Mr. Mayor. I want to ask you, on that front, taking care of New York City, you have to have an anti-terror policy, and that's
Yes.
one of the few mayors probably in the U.S. who has to do that. How will that inform you as Commander-in-Chief?
I'll tell you, number one terror target in America, that's what New York City is. And so we have constantly built up an intelligence gathering apparatus and the ability to be close to our communities as well, because it's not just traditional intelligence that matters, it is grassroots relationships with communities where you often get the tips and the information that stop things before they happen. So I've learned how much of keeping us safe is, it's not just top down, it's grassroots up. And I've also learned how much we need all of the different players, the FBI, the NYPD, state police, everyone working on the same page, which is not something that was always the case in this country and certainly not around the world. A president needs to get the different countries of the world in alliance with us to share information, to work in concert. That is how we defeat terrorism.
And that daily briefing is something that you get as the mayor, essentially?
Of course, and I have a security status to get some very sensitive information and to understand just how real some of these threats are, but also to see that if we are smart and coordinated and proactive, we can protect ourselves, and we've been able to do that in New York.
All right, Mr. Mayor, thanks for joining us for Conversation with the Candidate on TV. This conversation will continue online and on our mobile app. Join us there. Thanks for watching.